So I'm a little late on this trend, but that's probably okay since I'm always late on anime trends anyways. Spy Family, or at least I think that's how you read it, Core 1 has come and gone, and everybody loves it. I do as well. I think it's quite excellent. In particular, one of the main characters is handled very well, and I really enjoyed how it went about exploring family dynamics. Before we get into the meat of this video, I'll do the spoiler warning here. This video will only contain spoilers for Core 1, or the first 12 episodes of Spy Family. I haven't read the manga, so there won't be any spoilers for that. There's all that usual shit about how the characters are charming and the anime is funny, so I won't belabor those points here. Rather, I want to start things with episode 1. I like episode 1 a lot because I think it does a great job at selling the concept to the viewer. It gets a ton of mileage out of both Lloyd's spy skillset and Anya's telepathic abilities to create both unique and interesting interactions. Lloyd's inability and skeptical attitude towards parenting pairs together brilliantly with Anya's abilities and her sensitive nature. She's prone to overreacting constantly at any little scrap of negativity in Lloyd's mind, but he himself isn't aware of this, so it repeatedly attacks his inexperience in parenting to a point where it causes one of the world's best spies to panic. There's also some strong sentimental tones that do a really good job in touching upon both Lloyd and Anya's respective pasts, especially Lloyd's motivations. The couple bits of action in this episode that come up are great as well. The clean and dry sense of professionalism in how Lloyd approaches his spy work contrasts extremely with his troubles with parenting, which again feeds back into the amazing pairing between him and Anya. As far as opening episodes are concerned, this stands out as one of the most memorable ones I've ever seen. Episode 2 is kind of a continuation of this same theme if you remove some of the sentimental tones, then replace Anya with Yor, and would you believe it, episode 2 is also great. In general, almost every single interaction between the core trio of Lloyd, Yor, and Anya is always interesting because of how Spy Family has done an outstanding job at writing abnormal characters into normal circumstances. It does this by giving each of those characters the same goal but a different approach. All three are interested in keeping the ship sailing as smoothly as possible. Lloyd gets by without too much trouble. Yor tries her best but is always 2 steps away from associating everything with violence. Anya also tries her best, but her telepathy can result in her overcorrecting her own behavior or panicking. Navigating through what should be fairly effortless activities like going to a museum or a restaurant always ends up becoming a little awkward or messy. The way that the interactions weave together between Lloyd and Anya in episode 1 and then Lloyd and Yor in episode 2 is just scratching the surface of how the Forgers operate. Lloyd's willingness and capability to adapt to these kinds of situations on the fly, such as for most of the interview at Eden College or when Yor's brother visits, helps those scenes retain their sense of flow so that it doesn't risk turning into an awkward train wreck, and for those scenes where Lloyd is absent, well, Yor and Anya get by with their own respective methodologies. All in all, it's a way to pack interesting abnormal scenarios into the show under the veil of what should be a normal situation. Honestly, it's genuinely impressive how a lot of these aspects of the show come together in such a cohesive manner. My favorite moments throughout the anime were ones that were focused either on Lloyd and Yor or the entire family as a whole. The best way that I can put this is that the more family-centric episodes are the best examples of utilizing abnormal characters in normal circumstances that the anime has on display. Episodes 4, 9, and 12 are the peak examples of this for me. They also just happen to be my 3 favorite episodes of the anime. While I think the lead up into the interview is hilarious because of how over-prepared the Forgers are, the actual interview scene itself is really, really good. Murdoch Swan is genuinely despicable with his insistence on asking compromising questions and making snide remarks out of jealousy. Things like asking Anya whether or not she prefers her current or previous mother and making frankly offensive comments about Yor's role in the family actually made me uncomfortable when watching this, as if I was peeking into some extremely private matters that I wasn't supposed to be seeing. Watching Swan get his comeuppance through Henderson caving a skull in is particularly satisfying, and I haven't even mentioned how I think Lloyd's exit line packs a devastating blow. But the part about this interview scene as a whole that I really like so much is that this is the first real moment in which Lloyd seems to consider the whole group as a family. His actions and thoughts are misaligned when he destroys the table out of some kind of instinctual anger when Swan upsets both Anya and Yor. Despite being this legendarily successful spy, he does something that actively jeopardizes the integrity of this extremely critical operation. Contrast that to a lot of his previous actions where he always tried to be as deliberate and organized as possible, and I end up finding that this scene as a whole really speaks volumes about Lloyd's character. One last thing about episode 4 that I'll throw out there is that Housemasters Evans and Henderson are a great addition to the interview scene because their tendencies to be a bit more reasonable exacerbates Swan's unsavory actions, which makes the scene just that little more impressive. Episode 9 is another one that has a larger focus on Lloyd. After meeting Yor's brother Yuri, who works for the secret police, Lloyd suspects that Yor knows this as well and goes out of his way to monitor Yor to ensure that she doesn't pose a threat to his identity as a spy. Lloyd going very far out of his way to test whether or not Yor was operating against him to a point of attempted emotional manipulation made me extremely uncomfortable, just like the last episode we talked about. Bonus points goes to Frankie for playing a very distasteful character in order to make the scene even more uncomfortable. That specific nature of the scene only gets amplified by the fact that Anya points out Yor and Lloyd not getting along together, only for Lloyd to completely disregard this statement by closely monitoring Yor throughout the day. This discomfort not only stems from the extent to which Lloyd takes things, but also that we know Yor is innocent. Innocent when it comes to this matter, maybe not in totality. But similar to episode 4, it's precisely that sense of unease which makes the resolution of the episode so satisfying when seeing that sense of guilt washing over Lloyd and his following words of encouragement to Yor. It can be tricky to make the viewer feel intentionally uncomfortable without the whole sequence just coming off as insensitive or tasteless. But when it comes to the few instances of it seen in Spy Family, I think it's done quite well because there's a purpose to this discomfort, that being Lloyd having a moment of realization about how he views his family. Those moments of realization being taken seriously helps clearly separate it from the comedic core of the anime to highlight what are these cases of notable character growth for Lloyd. These are, of course, not the only examples. There are other moments in which Lloyd's focus on Operation Strix clashes with the actual dynamic of the Forgers. Those moments are my favorite aspect of Spy Family because while things vary from scene to scene, the one constant is how well the actual family dynamic is explored. A lot of these instances are told from the limited perspective of Lloyd, which helps strongly emphasize his newfound understanding of his family. That lack of an omniscient perspective during those moments also helps add a dash of realism to those situations, which I greatly appreciate. Penguin Park feels like the quintessential Spy Family episode with how it merges both halves of the concept rather seamlessly, the spy part and the family part. It's actually an episode that I don't have a whole lot to speak of besides the fact that I think it's the best execution of this concept. I like the setting, the mission is interesting, and I specifically really enjoyed Anya's involvement during the mission too. When zooming back out and looking at Cour 1 as a whole, I don't have any real criticisms outside of the fact that I'm not a huge fan of the episodes that are largely focused on Anya's school life. I just don't find the cast of characters almost exclusively featured in Eden College as interesting as the ones back home, so Anya's interactions with characters like Damien and Becky don't really stick out to me. They're not bad episodes by any means, but I also didn't find myself heavily invested as I watched them. So that pretty much does it for Spy Family Cour 1. Thank you to everybody that watched this video. If you enjoyed it, then maybe consider dropping a like or even subscribing to the channel. The Darling in the Franxx video is still in the works, but I needed a bit of a break, and this is the result of that. There might be another short video that comes out before the Franxx one, but I'm not going to promise anything. Once again, thanks for watching, and take it easy.